Thank you so much for joining. I have a very special guest today. Her name is Karen Hunt, and she's going to be speaking to us, giving us an idea of maybe considering, because I this is something that I have been very curious about. I haven't read the book yet, but it just keeps coming up. And so when I spoke with Karen a while ago, she mentioned this to me, and I'm really excited to hear what she has to share. But the book and the practice is called The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning is going to be the topic this evening. And it's based on the bestseller book written by Margareta Magnusson. And I just want to give you a little information about Karen. She's just this beautiful soul that I have had the privilege to get to know. Karen Hunt is a certified end of life doula through Doula Givers Institute and has her proficiency badge from NEDA, which is the National End of Life Doula Alliance. She holds an active RN BSN license and is the founder of Doula of the Sacred Canyons in Silverado Canyon in California. Karen's life experiences have prepared her to assist and advocate for those facing the final journey. Her first career in nursing led to a position as a labor and delivery nurse, serving to bring life into the world. This experience would later influence her practice as a hospice case manager and then as an end of life doula, with the outcome of enhancing her ability to support, guide, and honor the sacred flow of the dying process. I'm so excited to hear what Karen has to share. And thank you so much for joining us, Karen. I'm gonna turn it over to you. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and asking me to be here. Can you see, you can't see my notes on the screen, can you? Okay, good. That's really good. I did some research on the author of this book, and the book was actually written in 2018, and she's a professional artist. I don't know if anybody knew that. She's a professional artist, and this was her very first book. So I thought that was really exciting that she did that. And then Barbara had mentioned, and somebody else had mentioned to me that there's also a TV show that's on Paramount about the death cleaning. And I haven't seen that, but I'm certainly going to look that up. But the author started doing this death cleaning after her mother had died. And her mother was, had some things that were in order, but she had helped her do the death cleaning. And then Margareta started helping others doing it as well. So she thought she'd write a book about it. She believes that it is our responsibility and not others for removing unnecessary things that we have in our home. It's really a gift that we give to our families to look through the items in our house and decide what we want to keep and what we want to pass on. And she also believed that this practice, the death cleaning, would start a conversation with our family members on the idea of death and dying, which is so interesting because I told my son this last weekend, I saw him and I was telling him that I was going to do this, and I was talking to him about death cleaning, and he was like, "Mom, why are you doing that?" I just thought that was, "Mom, what are you talking about? Are you going to die?" And I'm like, "Yeah, someday we all are, aren't we?" So it did start that conversation. So some cultures, I was thinking of some cultures like the Vikings and the Egyptians. They buried all their belongings with them, didn't they? I mean, they had these big pyramids with their furniture and all kinds of things in there. We don't have that option. Could you imagine a burial plot that would have to be that big that you could put all your items in there? So I actually became interested in getting my affairs in order when I was in my 60s, and now I'm in my 70s, and grew up in a home that was extremely chaotic. It wasn't organized. I could never find anything. So it was very, very stressful. We had a living room in the front of this old farmhouse that was perfect. My mom had that living room just perfect because that was the only room anybody could go into. But the rooms behind that, you weren't allowed to go in there because there was a lot of chaos going on. So in my 60s, I decided to get a little bit more organized and didn't want to leave my loved ones going through a maze of paperwork trying to figure out what I wanted. So I bought this huge bag here, which I will show you, and hopefully you can see that. So it has a big typewriter on the front of it. And this is where, inside this bag is where my advance directives are, the living will is in here, the all of the paperwork regarding our house is in here, and all my important papers are in here. And then I also got a password book. Let me see what I did with that. I got a password book, so this has all my passwords in it. And I have a family member that has my sister has all of her passwords in little pieces of paper, and they're all over her house. So good luck trying to find her passwords. So, and then I also mentioned one time, I think on this group, that in your phone there's a legend in here, and you can find this legend, and you can actually um, put in what person should have authorization to get into your phone. And then you print out a what do you call that? That square, this, see, I can't even remember the name of it. Like a SKU. It prints it out with the SKU, so then they take their phone and they copy that SKU and they can get into your phone, because people don't think about all the phone numbers we have on our phones. So anyhow, that's that. I started that when I was in my 60s, starting to get things together. So and also it really spoke to me, the childhood that I had. I didn't want, I wanted to be more organized, and it can be painful for some people. So as I'm talking, some of you might be thinking, I can't get rid of this stuff, or maybe your parents or family members or friends that you have that really are struggling with this. And it can be very difficult. We'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of my presentation. So the decluttering practice it's a kindness to simplify your life, and then also to reduce the burden on your loved ones. So my dad had gone into a hardware store many, I don't know, 40, 50 years ago. And it was one of these old stores that was built, I think, in the 20s or the 30s. And it had it had a tall ceiling, and all the walls were covered in all kinds of knickknacks and things. And he found this oil painting, and I think he bought it for $50. It's a beautiful oil painting of this woman, and she's looking at her ring, and my dad did all the research on the painting, and I have that painting today because I had gone to art school when I was young, and he knew I loved art. So he passed that on to me before he passed away. And I also got a copper lamp, and it has a lampshade on it that's made out of shell. It's just beautiful. I have my grandmother's sewing table. I have a rocking chair from my mother, and a dresser, and a writing table. A cute story about that rocking chair. My mom liked antiques. I'm from Ohio. And we went over Mr. Moon's house. He was the antique dealer, and he had a whole garage full of antiques. And we found this black rocking chair, and we took it home and we washed it, and we kept washing it and washing it. Had this beautiful print on the back of it. It was just gorgeous. It was a very light wood with like an Amish print on the back of it. So that traveled all the way from Ohio to California. It's sitting on my front porch today. So yeah. So the benefits of this practice. So it'll help people let go of their unnecessary connection with material objects. When I was a child, we didn't have very much stuff. I don't know about you, but I didn't have very many clothes. We didn't have a lot of objects that we collected a lot of. So today's world is a little bit more materialistic, and we sometimes think if we have more things, the better. But it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality of the things that we have. So another benefit, it helps one lead a simpler life by prioritizing quality, like I said, over quantity. And, I don't know about you, but I have a lot of stuff in my drawers in my kitchen. And so lately I've been getting rid of a lot of them. So, I don't need to have like 10 spatulas, right? And I don't need to have 10 spoons. And, my drawer was so jam-packed with stuff that I've been letting things go. And my neighbor, she likes it when I pass on these things, so I pass them on to my neighbor and do so we don't need all those things. So when you're in order, you actually have more time for yourself when you get rid of all this stuff. And I don't know about you, but I can't find things. And as a kid, that was one of my biggest problems is I could never find anything because my room was totally out of order. My mom had depression, so she was in bed a lot. And so my bedroom floor was just loaded with my clothes. I just did bad in school. So being orderly is very, very important. And it just decreases your burden in life, wouldn't you say? I mean, that's what I think. And then this whole book is about taking responsibility for your own possessions and not expecting somebody else to be responsible for all your possessions after you're gone. There's 7 steps I wanted to talk about. The first step, which she talks about in the book, is letting others know what you're doing, letting your family members know that you're going to be doing some death cleaning. And as I said before, it helps open up the door talking about death and dying. And this will also help you be accountable. And you'll be surprised at how many people want to support you in that, your friends and your family. And but you're going to want to start this. Step 2 is you want to start with less personal items. You don't want to start with letters and photos because you kind of go down the rabbit hole when you do that. You get stuck and then you're remembering things, and that takes a lot of time. So you want to save those kind of things for last. So you might want to start with furniture, with books, with your clothes. So one of the things that she suggested in the book was inviting friends over for a bottle of wine. So we're all going to Barbara's house for a bottle of wine, and then ask their opinion, your friends, what opinion do you have on this clothing item? Should I get rid of it? Should I keep it? And go over that. And it can be a lot of fun. And I actually had a friend that had us over. It wasn't in regard to death cleaning, but she just asked us to bring over clothes that we didn't want to have anymore. So we all did, and we all found stuff. And then at the end, what she did is she donated all the clothes that were left over to Goodwill, which I thought was pretty cool. So you need to do this fast with your clothes. You don't want to do it slowly because what will happen is you'll wind up hanging on to everything. But she suggested that we make piles. Take everything out of your closet. Take it all out of your closet. Your first pile is going to be the clothes you're going to keep. And that second pile are the ones that you want to get rid of. And I'm saying you really should have a third pile. It's the ones that you're not quite sure yet if you want to get rid of or not. So, yeah, so keep in mind that this process can be hard, but I like that you take everything out. Things that you haven't worn in years. Do you still have stuff from high school? I certainly hope not. And stuff that you're never going to fit into. And I was explaining before we started that I have the cutest top and I can't quite get rid of it yet, but it has these gold beads. It's an anthropology shirt. It has these cute gold beads and it's bright pink and white and it's short. I'm not going to wear a short top. I'm too old for wearing a short top, but I just can't quite get it to work, but I haven't let go of it yet. But those are some ideas. So kitchen pots and pans, and I talked about the utensils, and I've been telling some people about my bundt cake pan. Okay, I made one bundt cake in this pan, one. That's it. And it had, I think there was 5 sticks of butter and like 10 eggs, it was really a good bundt cake, but I know I'm not ever going to make a bundt cake again. So this is out the door. This is going. And I was telling everybody before the meeting that I did look up what I could do with the bundt cake. And they said, you can put a candle in it, you could paint it, you could make it into a wreath, all these crazy things. And that ain't going to happen in my world. I'm artsy, but I'm not craftsy. So if you want this, let me know and I'll send it to you. How's that? So go through your pots and pans. I've gotten rid of a lot of them. I had like 3 cake pans, square pans rather. I have 2 cake pans, but I had the square pans. they had rust on them. So I just threw them away. The other thing that you can look at too is books. Books can be donated. Books can be donated to libraries. They can be donated to co-op bookstores. But I have some books that were from my dad that I've kept. And if you know that you have these great books and that nobody's going to want them, then, or papers or photos or whatever, but you're not ready to let go of them, put them in a box. And then right on the top of that box, the author says, right on the top of the box, these items can be discarded after I'm gone. They can just get rid of them if you don't want them. But I have like my mom's, her yearbooks from college. I have my yearbooks. I don't know if anybody else is really going to want those things. Think about that. And then gift possessions. Gift your possessions away gradually. Things that you no longer know you're going to use. For example, I have beautiful china, but we really don't have a lot of people over. I have a 12 set, or no, I have a 8-piece set of china with everything that goes with that. And that was from, let me think here. That was from 1980s. I've had that china. So I broke it in half. I broke the china. I mean, I didn't literally break it, but I I took half of my china and I put it in a box for my son. Now I don't have any daughters. I have one son. And I explained to him that I can't use this. There's too much, and I don't use it. So he doesn't have room for it. So I put it in a box and I labeled it that it's his. And that's another good thing to do is go around your house and put stickers on your items. Ask your kids, if you have kids, if you have family members, would you want this after I'm gone? There's nothing wrong with talking about that, and then put labels on them afterwards. Tablecloths, if you have tablecloths, if you have way too many of those, and you have a friend that has admired some tablecloths that you have, then give them to them. Give them as a gift. It's a beautiful thing to do for Christmas. You've admired this, put it in a fancy box or in a fancy bag and let them have it. I think that's a great idea. So make sure that you give these items to people that will care and cherish them the same way that you have too. It's really important. Even when you're going, and this is my idea, even when you're giving things away to Goodwill or wherever, try to give them away with good intentions. Think about what you're doing here. You're recycling. You're making the world a better place by recycling clothes, not throwing them away, but recycling them. And items that I've gotten rid of that I've taken to places to donate. I like to think that maybe there's somebody that the items that I love, that they'll get them and they'll love them just as much or even more. Or maybe they really need those clothes that you don't need anymore. So I think intentions go a long way. And give yourself some grace knowing that you are helping with the recycling and you're helping the planet in doing so. Collectibles. I have collectibles. I have these teapots. I don't know if you can see this. This is my favorite teapot, but I have about 7 of them. And so collectibles are a little bit harder to get rid of, but again, that's something that you can gift somebody. You can give them one of your teapots. I'm not ready to let go of mine yet, but I will when the time comes, and I'll have to really think about who I would want to give them to, because they're pretty special to me. Each one of them has a story, and that's the other thing I wanted to tell you. Whatever story is behind your tablecloth, behind items that you give to your friends, tell them the story that went behind that. Because I have some teapots that came from my son, and they're really special, and I really care about those. Keeping mementos for yourself. That's step number 4. What did I say step 3 was? 3 was gift possessions away gradually, give them away gradually. And then step 4 is keep mementos for yourself. And that's sort of what I said. If there's things that you're not ready to let go of yet, just put them in a box and say, to get rid of them afterwards. So And one thing to remember, just because they're sentimental to you doesn't mean they're going to be sentimental to others, right? Letters and pictures, as I said, those are really hard to do. And the author talked about how she had scanned all of these pictures of her children. She has 5 kids. So she scanned all their pictures into a computer and she put them on a memory stick for each one of them. And then she gave them to her kids at Christmas time so that they would always have that. And then you can donate and sell the rest of the things that you have. That's step number 5. You can actually have an auctioneer come in if you need to, like if you have family members that have passed away, you can have an auctioneer come in, and we had to do that for my mom. This is kind of a sad story. So my mom, that house I told you, that old house that we lived in Cleveland, Ohio, it was the farmhouse, and the person who lived in that farmhouse owned all the land around it. And so all that land around there, they sold all the land, and it all became these newer homes, split level homes. This was back in the 60s. So we lived in that house, and she lived in that house until she died. And it was really a really special house. The records of that house went back to 1830, and the public records building burned down. So we really don't know how old that house was. But my mom was kind of eccentric, and she took the plaster walls off the front room, and the log cabin was underneath it. And then we found pictures of that log cabin with the women standing out front with their dresses that went all the way down to the ground. And the great big oak trees that we had, they were really tiny next to these women. So they had just started growing. So really a special house. But what happened is she paid off the house. My parents got divorced when I was in my early 20s. The house was paid off, but she didn't pay the property tax. And she never told us that. And so she lost the house. The bank took that house over. This house was filled with antiques from top to bottom. There was Amish antiques, there was Jenny Lind beds, there was every kind of antique you could imagine was in that house. It was just so amazing. But we had to sell them. We had to get an auctioneer come and sell almost everything. We were really blessed that we were working with a bank that would let us take the items out of the house. Normally, they would not let you do that. But we took the items out, the auctioneer sold them, and then there was items that they weren't able to sell, and so we kept those items. So it's a hard story for me to tell because my mom was very private. She, we didn't even have the key to her house, although I have to say the key was one of those skeleton type keys to her house, but we didn't have the key to the house. So that was very difficult, but you can do that. You can get an auctioneer to come out and help you. So once you've made piles of things to get rid of, you need to get them out of your house as fast as you can. Otherwise, you may double back and decide to keep things. If you're not keeping it and you can't find someone else to take it off your hands, don't let it sit in your garage another decade. I've had things like that. And right now, I have my son's rocking horse from when he was a baby in the garage. And my son is 50 now. And he's got a girlfriend, but he has decided he doesn't want to have kids. So why am I hanging on to this thing? So I'm going to have a talk with him. Maybe he'll still want it, but most of the paint is faded off of it. I'm not sure if that's something he would want to keep, but we'll see. So places you can donate to. Now we have people from all over the country here on this meeting, but I'm sure you have a Goodwill near you, Salvation Army, the veterans, the Vietnam Veterans of America. And then there's a place called Mercy House that I take a lot of my clothes to, which is really nice. Prom dresses, your bridesmaids' clothes, all that can be donatemydress.org. Okay, and then old towels can go to the Humane Society. So in animal shelters, they can always use towels. You can rip them up and use them as rags, but now I've got a huge bag of ripped up towels that I have to start getting rid of. Furniture, Habitat for Humanity. A lot of these places, they just require you to send them a photo. And then cars can go to Vietnam Veterans of America. And there's also some radio shows. I think NPR News, they take donations of cars as well, I believe. And then there's a whole list online of places you can go to, like eBay and Craigslist, OfferUp, Facebook Marketplace, Poshmark, all these places you can make donations to. And then step 6 is making a list of important documents and passwords, and we already covered that. So, yeah, and then step 7 is declutter regularly. And she talks in the book, it was kind of funny. She says she puts on an apron that has pockets in it. She puts on an apron that has pockets in it, and then she has a bag. So she walks around her house and she puts things in the pockets, and then things she wants to donate, she puts in the bag. And so I thought that was kind of cute. So try to get rid of all this stuff. It's just not good. It's a good habit to get in. And if you notice that you don't use something often, keep a box or a bag handy and keep a pile of those things going, and then reflect on them. Am I going to ever use this? Who could use this? Be honest with yourself if you can. And if you're having a hard time, bring a friend in to help you out with it. And just remember that it's something that you do for your family. I wanted to talk a little bit about hoarding, because there's all kinds of reasons why people hoard. And I unfortunately have had some situations with patients that I've taken care of as a doula and also as a hospice nurse, where the hoarding was just so awful. I had a young woman, she was in her early 20s and she had melanoma. She was started on hospice, and her father was a very large man, and he didn't work, and she had 3 brothers, and they were older than her, but she was the one who was taking care of everybody because her mother had died. And it was really sad. When she got the melanoma, the house just fell apart. And every time I would go, there would be more and more garbage and stuff that would be brought into the house that nobody was getting rid of. And towards the end of her life, I remember the last time I went there, I couldn't get the front door open hardly, and we had to call APS. We had to call them to come and get her out of the house. And I have to tell you, she was so happy because she loved watching TV all day long. And we found her a place where she could take this little doggie that she had that she loved. And she sat there in bed and watched TV all day long. And I'm sure that the house that she was in had to be condemned because it was just awful. She had the dog had fleas and she had bites on her, and her family just wasn't taking care of her. I don't know if they weren't capable. I don't know if it was abusive, but I've seen some pretty horrendous hoarding things that have gone on. But just keep in mind that there is a diagnosis of this, and it can be due to depression, it can be due to trauma in childhood. And I think that's what happened in my family. There was some trauma with my mom in her childhood. So we had a lot of stuff in our house that we shouldn't have had, and it just made things difficult. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about the 90-year-old man that I went to see. He was on hospice and he was taking his last breath, and I was there to start him on hospice while I was taking his last breath. And I just can't reiterate to you how important it is to have everything in order, because they had nothing in order. They didn't have a funeral home. They didn't have any paperwork. And it was like people on a hamster wheel going around and around and not getting anywhere. I mean, it was just chaotic and stressful and awful. And I just don't want anybody to have to go through that. And it's just very, very difficult. I'm going to bring up something that's called the 3 Ps. Perfectionism is the first one. Procrastination is the second one, and paralysis is the last one. So a lot of people I know, and myself included many years ago, I tended to be more of a perfectionist. And because I was a perfectionist and I couldn't do things just right, then I would procrastinate. And the more I procrastinated, the more I became paralyzed. And that's, just keep those in mind. Now, my father-in-law was a hoarder, and he admitted to that. He passed away a couple years ago of dementia, and he had the most amazing things in his house. He still does. So his house is not too far away. My mother-in-law lived there until she fell recently, and I'm trying to find her an assisted living to move to. But all of his stuff is still in his library, all the stuff. And I asked him one time why he didn't get rid of some of the stuff, and he told me it was extremely painful. He had bought something on eBay, and it wasn't something, it was just something he really liked a lot, and he got rid of it. And he said, Karen, I can't even describe to you the pain that it causes me knowing that I let that go. And sometimes people just think, I'm going to use that someday, and someday never comes. So it really opened up my eyes to the problem that he had with hoarding, and he knew it. And he was a child that was very traumatized. He was taken away from his parents at a very young age and placed with relatives that really didn't like kids at all. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball and know all the answers to these things, but I know in my travels through hospice and through what I'm doing today, I've come across people who trauma seems to be in childhood seems to be the factor that we always hit on. And there's been studies done about people who go to the emergency room a lot, especially women. They've done research projects, and a lot of those women have trauma in their childhood, or they've been abused. So my father-in-law was a beautiful man, but he did pass away 2 years ago, and now my mother-in-law is, we're going through that, and my husband took over my father-in-law's business. And so it's really me. I'm the one who really needs to help find this assisted living for my mother-in-law, because she fell recently right on her brand new hip that had been replaced. Her joint had been replaced. So this is the second time she's fallen at home and wound up with serious problems. So, life is in session, as we say. So I hope this information helped you. I did skip one thing, and that was tools. Lots of tools in the garage. My father-in-law has a 3-car garage. No cars are in it. It's just all tools and stuff. So it's going to be real interesting getting rid of all those things. But I have noticed that when there's garage sales, if you list tools on them, there'll be a million men that will show up to get those tools. So, and you can just give things away. You don't have to sell stuff, but you can give things away if people don't buy them. And I do that. I've done that a lot on Facebook Marketplace, and also on Nextdoor. Nextdoor, you can upload pictures of things and do that. So I'm just really blessed that you had me today. I hope that you gathered something from the information that I left you. I do have a list of places to donate that I can certainly provide for you if you would like that. But because people are from other areas, it might not help them. But just to let you know, I don't even know how long I talked. Do you want me to keep going? No, I'm kidding.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Karen. That was amazing. I made lots of notes. Um, that was really powerful. Karen had asked, actually, Karen had asked, reminding what the 3 Ps are, and it's perfectionism, procrastination, and paralysis. And then Barbara said, what is APS? So I missed that
Oh,
as
thank
well.
you. That's Adult Protective Services.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Because she was an adult. She was in her 20s, so she was an adult. There's
Thank you so much.
there's Children's Protective Service as well, but thank you for asking that.
And Barbara I also put things out in front of my house with the free sign and they disappear. I love that. I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh, so powerful. I think Oh my gosh. I think about when my mom and dad passed away, we had multiple yard sales and one large estate sale, um and I regret one item that I did not keep. It was my mom's little 45 record player, and we sold it, and later we discovered, my sister found my mom's old 45s, and that's one thing that I wished I would have kept. But
Mhm.
the rest of the other items, um, I still use my mom's hair dryer, and my mom's been gone 7 years. I know. So it's, things like that that, I'm not quite ready to let go of. I have my grandmother's scissors that she's had for 50 years. And so things like that that, um, have meaning to me that I use, and knowing that their hands were, like I'm cutting things with my grandma. So, gosh, this was powerful. I love how you mentioned, that, I will really hang on to, putting in a box that these things can be discarded, like my parents' um, yearbooks. Like, I'm not quite ready to get rid of them, and I don't quite know what to do with those. But I love the idea of, giving myself permission to hang on those for a little bit longer, and, maybe choosing later, that it's okay to let those go. But my letting my son know that they can let those go after I go. And I love the idea of books being sent to the library, and I love the idea of, giving things as a Christmas gift, like tablecloths and things like that, because that's been special for me. I have some of my sister's mother-in-law. My sister calls her, she's my sister's been married a couple of times, and she calls her, previous in-laws outlaws. So it's her outlaws tablecloth. And I have her tablecloths, and I just love them because she was all about those beautiful teapots that she had and stuff like that. So just, this was amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. I wanted to just open it up to see if anyone, had any questions. You feel free to raise your digital hand, or, if you, just want to go ahead and come off and, unmute yourself. Maggie, they have animal groups that have nonprofit stores. All proceeds go to support, animal adoptions and expenses. Beautiful, Maggie. Thank you for that.
Karen, I
Great.
wanted to thank you so much because I actually am starting with a client tomorrow. She's paid for 10 hours of my time to help her start cleaning. She's got, I mean, the place is a mess. I don't even know where we're going to start tomorrow, but I love the idea of an apron, and I have a really fun apron that I'm going to bring her, and I'm going to tell her that when we do our cleaning, I'm going to have her put on this special apron. And thank you for that. I have one question about, have you had ever, when you're working with someone, found rodents and things, and how do you deal with that? I'm afraid of mice. So that was my biggest fear of tomorrow of going in. And I already told her I wouldn't do the pantry because I could see there was mouse poop in there. So I told her I couldn't do that. But I'm wondering if you've had any experiences of something you couldn't do and how you handled it.
We had
Thanks.
some houses that we had to go into as a hospice nurse where I always had to carry newspapers with me and I had to sit on them, because there wouldn't be just rodents, there'd be other things, little bugs crawling around and stuff, cockroaches. It's difficult. I live in a community where we're just kind of used to rodents being around, and because I'm in a canyon and there's a lot of wildlife. Luckily, I have several owls around that are taking care of some of those rodents. So I would not tell you to take an owl with you, but you might want to take some newspapers with you if you feel like you need to sit on that, and then make sure that your purse, if you bring any belongings, make sure that they're up high and not down low. There's some rodents that are in my mother-in-law's house, and we've been dealing with that, having people come in and spray and take care of that. But I understand. I've kind of gotten used to it. So, good question. Karen, you can also say that you're not comfortable with that. There have been some homes I've gone into where I've had to say, that I'm not comfortable, depending on the situation. I had a young man that thought he was cool throwing knives up in the air and trying to scare me, you know. And when you're a nurse, I was a visiting nurse at the time, you know, I was just like, yeah, whatever. But then I had to tell the person that I was taking care of that I didn't feel comfortable coming back to that home. So
I have a question. I'm just wondering if any of you have suggestions on how to start this conversation about getting rid of stuff with somebody who likely had the traumatic childhood and is having a hard time, um, I don't know, maybe acknowledging that this kind of gathering of stuff is an issue. Like, how do you, and they're a little bit defensive about the accumulation of stuff. So
yeah, I'm
start
dealing
that
with that right now with my mother-in-law, and so I always I you know, it depends. I'm just going to tell you what has worked for me. I have to ask God for the words and the timing. So, and I have to look for an opening. So after my father-in-law was placed in a skilled nursing facility, um, there was just books everywhere, and there was old videos, old video cassette tapes and stuff like that. And so I made the suggestion one time because that's an easy thing. Remember, I said start easy.
Yeah.
And, so you know, she agreed that I could come in and take some of that stuff out. And I donated a lot of books to the library that was local. But what happened is after about a month of me doing that, then I came over one day and she started crying and said, I feel like you're trying to get rid of my husband. So you just have to walk, you know, it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So you have to be very cautious and very careful. But as I said, telling somebody that you just went to a presentation, somebody was talking about death cleaning, that might open up the door and say, oh yeah, she was saying it's a gift that you give to your loved ones, and you know, and see what they say. Just see what they say. That's just my suggestion. And then Maggie, did you have something you wanted to add to that? Or
I
did
have
you can't open with a question? Did you have your hand up?
I have personal experience with that. And it was me. About 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I was up 12 years taking care of my son, and everything just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And there was a lady that I met that was doing feng shui. And so I actually, I say hired her, we didn't have much money, but asked her to come. I didn't even realize what shape my house was in. There might have been a foot where we could walk, and I will never forget going over as far close to the fireplace. And she sat on the hearth, and we started talking, and I just booed. I mean, just lost it. What I've learned, I worked with her for probably 15 years, off and on. We did coaching, we've done a bunch of things. But what I learned was growing up, my dad was a preacher, and the parsonage was the churches. And the only thing we owned were knickknacks. Even the lamps were part of the church property. And my mom made it a home with knickknacks and little things. And I remember her buying mirrors and buying little things just to make it. And so I realized that I was collecting a lot of things to make my house a home, way more than I needed. But when I would get, you were talking about the different types of things, I too felt like you're pushing me. And she was astute enough to know, okay, let's back off. And she called it low hanging fruit. And what I thought that I liked that because that made me feel a little less defensive. But low hanging fruit literally was right in front of you. It might be trash. It might be old calendars. It might be, I can't even think of all the things. But then she had me do the 3-box event over time. We did the 3 boxes just like you were talking about. Giveaway. I don't want to bother. Don't touch my stuff. And then what I definitely want to keep. And having that choice, I could give it if I knew somebody would use it, or if I was helping somebody, my mindset was I could release it. But I had to literally get into that point. And she would ask me, how long have you been since you used it? And you were talking about story. I love that because I had story for daggum near everything. and I didn't even realize it. But the stories was what was holding the things with me. I think it was the stories that meant something. And I'd say, this was my mama's whatever. And she'd say, and what would your mama say right now? And I said, what do you mean? Well, is the energy in this thing, or is your mom in your heart? And when she first I got mad, but then a little bit later on, she had a point. And and I took one of mama's, I had a seamstress, and I had one of mama's nylon, I guess it was nylon, the satiny kind of bathrobes that used to have with a little tie. And I had a friend, and she made me a pillow, and it had the lace on the thing, and she took it and she made it just a little pillow that's on my bed. And that was a better thing to have mama with me than so many of the other things. So you can find, I've seen people take pictures. My son had a special needs t-shirt. I still haven't gotten rid of it, but I've collected things that were material things that had symbolism. And I've seen people put those together in a quilt or in a blanket or something. And I think that has significant meaning. But I understand, going back to the hoarding thing, I didn't want to think of myself as a hoarder. But what I realized was I was so traumatized by the things that had happened in my life and in that last 15 years with my son, my mom's death, my father-in-law was killed in an accident, and depression and no sleep. All of that added up. And do I want to think of myself, or have I thought of myself as a hoarder? No, I couldn't. But I just looked at it as it had too much emotion attached to it. Therefore, I couldn't deal with it because I couldn't deal with any more emotion. So if you're working with somebody, just be aware of it. They could be very attached. And usually it's not the thing, it's the story and the emotion that goes with it.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something really important, is the history of the childhood without. This person had a very much a childhood without of stability, of possessions, of healthy emotional relationships. It just a very lacking, and so I think makes up for it with some physical possession.
Right.
And not to the hoarding point, but definitely beyond what is needed. So, yeah, I think
Glad to help anybody in any way. If I can ever be of help, let me know, because I've been there and walked that walk. Still sometimes have a tendency to, if I don't take the time and I have to separate and have the motion. What is this about? What's going on? Is this really what I think it is? Or did you just not take any time? This isn't the way you want to live. So, I mean, I just think you have to really look at the whole big picture. Most of us want to see the stuff. And, if you have my daughter, my house was disorganized. My daughter, her house has been extreme. In fact, she's gone way on the other end. And I'm finding that there are a few people I know that they are like their mother, but many, many, many people I know, mom was either very organized and they're disorganized, or they're disorganized, mom was disorganized and they're organized. And I honestly believe it was part of their response to what they were raised with, or what they didn't want. Maybe it wasn't what they wanted, but what they didn't want.
Thank you so much. I love the story about the pillow. That was just beautiful. What a beautiful thing. And Barbara, did you have a question or a comment?
I was just going to say that I have a sister whose husband died by suicide when they were young parents, and the little girl has grown up. She's in her late 20s now. But going to my sister's house once, it's kind of unkempt and there's a lot of stuff everywhere, but there was one room that I said, oh, there was something that she didn't need right then. I said, what should I do with this? And she said, oh, put it in the bedroom there. I'm like, oh, I didn't know there was a bedroom here. I opened the door. It was just a wall of stuff. There's just stuff everywhere. And I didn't know until that moment that my sister is kind of a hoarder. And this makes so much sense, that it's probably the trauma of losing her husband and, feeling out of control and feeling like the more stuff she gathers in, the more it protects her or something like that. But it's like, it's such a deep, complex psychological puzzle that I think it is hard to I don't feel like I would be equipped as a doula to go in and try to help someone like her. But I did when I watched that really charming series of the gentle art of Swedish death cleaning. It's so well done. And I'm sorry, my dog has a collapsed trachea. He's coughing in the background. But I recommended it to her, and didn't hear anything about it. But it's three Swedes who come to people's homes. I think they were somewhere in the Midwest. And there were a lot of hoarders, and one of the Swedes is an organizing expert, and one of them is a designer. This lovely gay man who's very funny. He's like the comic relief, and he redesigns their homes. It's sort of a makeover show too. And then the other woman is a psychologist, and they each kind of work their magic with the people whose homes they're invited into. And I can't recommend it highly enough. It's really, really well done. Amy Poehler is the kind of the voiceover.
Okay.
Really cute. She helped put it together. She was one of the producers, I think, of the series. It's on Peacock, I believe.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch that. But I enjoyed the book, and I enjoyed her humor in the book too, because she was humorous. And I have to tell you, the Swedes are way ahead of us when it comes to this death and dying thing, and living more simply and not having, gobs of stuff that we attach ourselves to. I did read something about children that grow up in families where they don't have their needs met. They transfer that over to an object, and they collect objects and feel a sense of security having those objects around them. And it just sort of grows as you get older. And sometimes it actually starts with later, not always right as you're young, progressing. Sometimes it's, this stuff shows up later. And I think one of the reasons why, and I've said this before in another group, we bury our feelings, but we bury them alive. So if you don't deal with your feelings, they come out somehow, and come out sideways a lot of times. So I think the hoarding might be a sideways way for them to come out. Just a thought. Yeah. Okay, did somebody say something in the chat here?
I just want to honor everyone's time. We usually end a quarter after, but
Wow.
we can go a little longer. I want to just make sure I'm honoring everyone's time. I see Maggie's hands up. If you guys want to hang out for a little bit longer, and we are
I just
open
want
to
to
it.
I've enjoyed
I
this
just
so
want
much.
to say one quick thing about books. Be careful with books. Most people would think you would have no emotion with book, but I lost $27,000 in my early 30s because I didn't have information I needed. And so I started buying bookshelves and books. And if it was something I would need, I'd get one for somebody else. I was going to have this. Nobody was going to have to hurt like that again, which is really crazy. And finally, this lady I was talking about came in and she said, "Okay, have you read any?" And I said, "No." And she said, because I'm not a reader, and she said, "Well, why are they here?" I said, "Because I heard at a seminar that successful people have libraries, and I want to be successful, and so I'm going to have a library." Well, that was what I told myself here, but it was the pain of the loss that was the real driving force. Thank you for letting me talk so much.
Oh boy.
Hey, Karen, have you read her other book, which was Living an Exuberant Life? Because it's how to live. She's got a book that came out, I think, probably 2 years ago now. And it talks about the tips for having an exuberant life, how to live. I have it upstairs. How to live an exuberant life. And I think she's like 89.
No, she's actually she's 91.
Okay, that was 2 years ago when she wrote when the book
So she
came out.
must have been, yeah, she was 89, right? I see what you're saying.
So
Wow.
it's great, and it's got some. I do some presentations and talk about that because I think as death doulas, we want to also talk about living and how to live exuberantly and how to live a good life, so that we can have a good death. And so I incorporate that in when I do different presentations and talk to people because it's kind of light and fun, and same, like you said, she's got a fun writing style.
She
So.
does. But thank you so much. And this has helped me with my mother-in-law because I'm not always as compassionate to her as I should be. But she's very difficult to, it's just hard. She's had illnesses all of her life. And so anyhow, enough of that.
But you know what? I also find like this lady that I'm going in to help tomorrow, it's because I don't have an attachment to her. She doesn't want to ask friends, right? And I've already told her we're going to do this really slow and gentle. And when she's had enough, I'll plan for 2 hours. But when she's had enough, we can say enough. I've had enough today. And but being able to do it with somebody else that she wasn't attached to. I mean, she doesn't know me very well, so
yeah, it's
that
harder
was-
with a family member, definitely. So.
Yeah.
But thank you, Christine, for asking me to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. I can't thank you enough.